All right, we're here. This is gonna be. I think this was around October 6th is when the video was posted. So this is gonna be from the Saturday before that. So that was October 4th. So some of Quarter shot some recordings of our Kingdom level tournament in Crystal Groves. That's where I'm from. It was in Baltimore at Angler's Rift, or Catonsville specifically. And it was a kind of a sparsely attended tournament, unfortunately. I think there was some, mostly like some scheduling issues where there was like the Lotus Games the weekend before the Kingdom level tournament in the middle, and then the Kingdom event the weekend after, and maybe like not the world's best advertising. However, I felt like the skill pool for this was really deep, and this was a tournament that I was like not sure if I could win if I had entered it. So it was like really exciting to watch. I did some reading for this, so I can't say that I'm like watching it fresh. And it's also like fighters that I know, but I haven't watched these videos yet, except for one. That I'll talk about that later. Let's make sure that we're on normal playback speed. Okay, we're getting outside fake. And it looks like Zeldin. Just for the audience. This is Dayless. This is Zeldin. Hey buddy, how are you? Thanks for coming by. So we had an outside fake there by Dayless. We got, okay, forward lean by Zeldin. I like a big drive. Outside fake. I'll watch this one again. So I think that looked like that was Zeldin's win. So for Dayless, we've got, I know we've got outside fake. What fake was this? This was, yeah, outside fake. And then what did Zeldin do? This guy just stepped back and got ready to counter strike. Okay. How does Dayless use this? Okay, just steps back and counters. So I think this fight one, it looked like Zeldin took it. I think my analysis is like, we've got Dayless kind of pumping this outside fake, and I think reading that, let me slow it down a little bit. So this is the body motion that I think that Zeldin used that indicates like, hey, I'm going to try to counter strike. So you're going to see Dayless sweep to the outside and step forward right there. I think Zeldin retreated, and you can see his hand over here is going to lift up a little bit and kind of come across over here. So that says to me like counter strike. So I'm wondering if Dayless is like, okay, I think if he's going to counter strike, I don't want to try to lunge in there. It's like Dayless can move his feet, but he doesn't have quite as long of a lunge as I think Zeldin tends to. Let's go back to normal speed. So I think for this fight here, we have that counter-strike information, but we kind of don't capitalize on it. I feel like Dayless waits on the outside to kind of see what happens. And the thing about this low stance that Zeldin does, I think the interesting thing about that I learned about Zeldin's really low stance is it does two things super well. It does this long upward sweep really well. I forget the name of it, but I saw one of the Sons of Terra guys doing kind of the same thing, but strictly in single sword, where he would drop down super hard with his back and lift his sword up in this upward sweep like this. So I think that that's kind of something to watch for, because Zeldin's got this preemptive low posture that kind of tells us those two things, right? That he's going to either stab or he's going to sweep up. And it looks like Dalus kind of launched a counter-strike here. And my thought process is, like for fight one, we had the information. It looked like he got the hand block, but we had the information that Zeldin wanted to counter-strike. So I think what Dalus decided to do was wait him out and say, okay, I'm not going to let you counter-strike me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until you open. And I think that that is a good play on kind of anyone who's not like already in this low posture with that upward sweep or that stab, right? Like it's one strategy to avoid being counter-struck is to just disengage and let the other guy lead the fight, because it's really hard. But I think that having that really low posture, especially in single sword, makes it really easy to get that rising chop in from low. But what I think I would have wanted to do instead is what the side effect that you have of kind of just waiting your opponent out is you're giving them the advantage that they are allowed to set the pacing and you have to react to what they're doing, right? So if we go back a little bit, Dalus kind of just waits at this range and isn't really like moving laterally or controlling footwork or anything. And like to Dalus's credit, I practice with him a lot. He has extremely fast reaction speed, but I think that this is a range that I would consider largely unreactable, right? Like this is pretty far, and I think Zeldin has a surprising distance that he can kind of sweep and close. So I would have, if you want to wait him out, you need to kind of back up, and if you see them move, you take a step back to try to ride out their shot and give yourself more time to block it and give your opponent more opportunity to overstretch, and then you would block and strike them. I probably wouldn't try to trade for offhand block, like a hand block, unless it was a situation where my sword was busy. I probably wouldn't want to, most of the time, I probably wouldn't want to hand block and counter aggressively, because like if you're wrong, now you're down a limb, like you're at half your hit points for the rest of the fight, right? So backing up, blocking him out, and countering is the other option, one option. The other option is when you know someone's going to counter strike, I think that Dalus probably could have taken the opportunity to stutter or juke to try to get that counter strike to come out, and then launch a counter strike of his own once he sees the path of that initial counter strike coming. Then you can kind of put your fist on their sword and your sword on their body like at the same time. So I think that that would be good, because Dalus's counter striking is extremely sharp. But it would also add some defense in there for him. And it would also add a measure of controlling the pacing, because the progressive stutters at Zeldin would let him not... It would basically tell him, like, you have to close in and you have to come in here, but you're not going to take control of the fight. I am going to hit you if you just stand there, right? So I think that that would have been a good way of exerting more control. So I think we've kind of got like, and that is to Dalus's credit, that is a positive trade, where Zeldin's down to his left hand now, and Dalus has his right hand. So Zeldin is right-handed, so is Dalus. So this is technically in Dalus's favor. However, I think that I would want to try to retain my limit if at all possible. The error that I see here is like, so Dalus tries to kind of fake to the outside and swing to get him open. Right, he did. Actually, I think it was an inside fake, outside chop, if I'm seeing this correctly. Yeah, it's like a flourish, inside pump, outside shot. So the issue that I'm seeing here is in exchange one on this fight. Zeldin already demonstrated that he wants to counter-strike, and trying to feint on someone that is going to counter-strike you, you're going to get hit on beat one, which is during your fake. And you'll hit them on beat two, which is most times going to be late. It looked like Zeldin's shot was, I don't remember what the call was here, but like it was more or less at the same time. But I think that that's kind of an example of like bringing the wrong Pokemon to the wrong gym, essentially, right? Like you don't want to fake on someone who's counter-striking you. The fake that you are doing on someone who is counter-striking is really just to get them to throw into your defense. So I think that the other thing that Daedalus can do in this situation is you don't know if his intent is still to counter-strike after he's taken a hand, right? Like maybe he wants to try to block strike out with his left hand, which is kind of common. So he can throw another pump or bailed out fake like he did on exchange 1 to try to see if Zeldin's going to lift his hand up like he's going to counter-strike. To kind of sense like, is he still in that mode? And that way you know the timing principle that you need to do to try to counter the dude. And obviously, like, he can change that timing principle, but that's kind of an advanced thing to do. That's fight 1. I remember watching these fights and thinking the reset distance for the bow was like super far away because that's usually done on the outside of the ring. But there was no ring, right? I wish we had just like tapped in and taken one step back or something. But there's a lot of time spent in this tournament like just waiting. But Daedalus opened with a feint. Let's see this again. Here we got nice horizontal guard here. I think this looked like... So what I'm seeing here is Zeldin kind of just tried to throw raw, and his gesture was kind of slow. So I think that gave Daedalus the window he needed to just like counter-strike the dude, right? So I think that that's the main error. If we look, what's Zeldin here? He's like, I'll pause it when he's attempting to swing. So he kind of has like this big raise up here. And then he's going to come in. And I think he throws the same shot even. But I think Daedalus has already seen this, so he's able to position. I want to see how he got this block. Actually, I think that might have been a simul. Because I think that Zeldin called that hitting him in the shoulder on shot 1. But we're still in that counter-strike mode, and we haven't shifted our timing principle. Yeah, he called chest. It was a good call by Zeldin. What a brute, man. What a brute. Yeah, to his credit, like, that's called the technical term for that is a stop hit. And it's literally just like, if they're counter-striking you and you can predict the angle, you put your fist on their sword and your sword on their body at the same time. I don't know if you do that intentionally, Toby, but it's very powerful. Especially in single sword. And it's a good counter-strike, too. Okay, so this is too close. This is way too close, right? Because like Zeldin already demonstrated that he's got a fairly long lunge distance. Like this is like a good half step for Zeldin, and since he's going to drop down, that extends his reach to these lower quadrants down here. So I think that we needed to be a step back. I think this position kind of favors Zeldin a little bit. You said you were a boxer, right? Like you've got tough knuckles. It's pretty good stuff. It's a weird way of thinking, and you kind of have to have a good background of either block strike or really paying careful attention. But stop hits are really powerful. Yeah, this is the other thing that Zeldin killed me with. I think Daedalus got the hand block because this reaction speed is really good. But this is the second thing that Zeldin's low stance is really powerful for. It's just stabs, right? Because this makes his stab go kind of sweep up like this. Which, like, if you push it down, there's a good chance that it's, like, still going to contact your body. And I struggle with that. I think Zeldin did that to me twice in a row in February, and it definitely hurt my morale. But I think that Daedalus is winning this kind of, like, on reaction speed. But I think that he could be doing it on strategy with a little bit more footwork. It doesn't have to be, like, anything super dramatic, but just a little bit of lateral movement, pressure. Standing back a little bit to try to entice Zeldin to lunge too far. Because if he over lunges, it puts him in a negative position. And will make it like a lot easier to get the snipes that he's looking for if you can get him in an overextended position while he's back a little bit. Okay, nice. Thanks for coming, DeVry. It's just a little bit too close. So we got a little bit of repositioning. And I like the flourishing that Dalis is doing up and down. So it's like, I feel like it's a good way of exercising a little bit of control over your opponent because they're thinking like, when is he going to swing? When is he going to swing? When is he going to swing? So that's solid, right? He's not just standing there completely static. There are some mind games going on. That was a good snipe. This is like a little Smash Brothersian spot dodge where he shifted his hips back and threw out. So I think that was really smart because Zeldin has attacked these quadrants like 3 or 4 times in a row now. So I think Dalis kind of measured up, spot dodged back, and hit him. So I think if my advice to Zeldin would be like, okay, you've kind of shown your plan to Dalis a few too many times in a row, right? And single sword is one of those things where like your first couple of fights are really frequently a simul, but you're still gaining a lot of information from those exchanges, right? So like we had a couple of simuls, but now Dalis is starting to figure out, okay, this is your range, these are your target areas, these are your preferred shots. So Dalis has that information now, and he just capitalized on it really well here. So I think Zeldin needs to add some more different quadrant attacks at this point. So got some hand matching. I got another simul. So I think this is not quite as close. This is a better distance than the last fight. I like this positioning a little bit better. I think that was like a slide or something was the call there. Or no, I think he got... No. It was like a missed stab. Stab slid. Okay. Yeah, I think another note for Zeldin is like, his game plan seems very contingent on stabs in single sword, but when you are hand matched, because of the way that people's bodies are oriented, it's a lot harder to land a stab, right? So I don't think Zeldin's on here. But if we imagine like this line is our shoulders, right? Up at like a little head. I think tab is circle. And we're going to throw a stab. Like this is an aerial view of a hand mat situation. So the way that stabs work is they don't just go like straight at the opponent. And this is still kind of a bad angle, right? Stabs as a pathway because you turn your torso and move your arm across like that. Stabs really go more like... So the line is the shoulders, the circle's the head. Our stabs, if we stab at him, it doesn't go straight forward like this. It goes more like this. So if you get your range control correct on a hand mat situation, it's really easy to just get this stab to kind of move past you, right? So I think Zeldin is kind of thinking about like the opposite situation. And if we stab, that carry angle goes in like this and lands perpendicular. So like for a non-hand matched, stabbing is really good. For hand matched scenarios, stabbing is like a little bit more iffy of a kind of thing to do. So I think maybe you might want to work on a little bit more slashing in that scenario specifically. Does the angles of that make sense to you, Zeldin? Thanks for coming by. And thanks for commenting too. We're going forward. That's good. I think that was a reset. Okay, it looked like Dallas got the accuracy there. So like the thing that the mental accounting that you have to do is like these guys both have the same game plan, right? So Dallas wants to counter-strike, and Zeldin wants to counter-strike, right, too? You both can't counter-strike. Like, something's got to give there, right? So there's a couple of different gambits that can work for this. So you could make the decision, Zeldin, you could say, like, I think that Dallas is a little faster than me. It has a little bit faster reaction speed. So you might think something like, okay, well, if he's the more experienced fighter, maybe I don't want to do a war on counter-striking as his main game plan, because like that is something that he does a lot of and is very good at. Like, I have to think about counter-striking every time I fight Dallas. You might try to do some other ways of approaching that situation, right? Because like if you're engaging Dallas in the same game plan, but he's more experienced in that game plan, you're kind of just waiting to lose, especially in single sword where that effect is very pronounced. The other thing that you could think of is like, Dallas, you have a little bit more experience here. If you could stutter to get him to counter-strike, I know your defense is pretty good too, and you could say to yourself, like, I'm the more experienced guy here. Maybe I don't want to counter-strike right now. Maybe I just need to get his counter-strike to come out so that I can block it and hit him, or that I can prepare like a little bit better of a counter-strike of my own. But you kind of want to like pump or juke or get him to like activate that plan. So it's like a toss-up based on your preferences and the context of like how the two of you interface with each other and that context. But those are like some options for you there. But yeah, I think Zeldin, like, if Dallas has more experience and is a little bit quicker than you and a little bit more accurate, you need to start thinking about like, I don't think that I'm going to be able to like go through this wall. I need to try to use like a different tactic, because you're kind of just engaging him where he is very strong and hoping to outstrength him where he is strong. Like, I think that I would just try to do something else. Like, I think that I have a very strong counter-strike game too, but I don't really counter-strike Dallas because I know that it's kind of a toss-up. Like, I don't want to win 50-50, 60-40, 40-60, whatever. Like, I want to win 70-30, 80-20. So my plan is more like, how can I draw his counter-strike or use a counter strategy that is reliant on the counter-strike that I know that's going to come. So that's the kind of strategizing that you would start to think about. It's like, what is my opponent's preference, and do I have a backup plan to deal with their preference, instead of like engaging them with their own preference and trying to like outmuscle the thing that they love to do, especially like at an experience disadvantage. So I hope that makes some sense. I think that's my input for this fight. Okay, yeah, you fixed this. Thank you, Rock. Okay, so just related to the last thing that I just said, I think that is what Toby does here with his first stutter. So pay attention to it. It's the very first move that he does here, right? He does a quick stutter. Right there, yeah. He did a stutter to see what he would do. I think Nocti Fell kind of jumped on that a little bit faster than Toby was expecting to. But since he stuttered into a position that was a block, it worked out really well for him. And then Toby was able to just kind of win on the exchange after he got the block. So this fight actually has a really good example of a counter strategy that I would try to use in the situation that we just talked about in the last fight. There's like little pump, bonk, bonk. That's like perfect execution on that one. I think that for Nocti Foul, it's just like he wanted to counter strike, and Toby just engaged in an anti-counter strike strategy. And there's like, if that's your plan, there's nothing you can kind of do about that. I think the only thing that you can really do at an experience deficit like that for Nocti is you can kind of hang out outside of range and try to derive their intent a little bit longer. Like, you really, in a tournament, you really don't want to kill them on the first shot, and maybe not even the second, especially in round one. unless you know them super well. If you don't know them super well, you want to engage in you want to give them a little bit of bullshit to see what you think that they're going to do, unless you know that you're way, way better than them, right? And I think in Nocti's situation, I think that he knows that he's the less experienced fighter here, so he needs to not try to take it on shot one. Just use some shallow stuff to try to derive their intent and the strategy that they have prepared. So this guy got blocked out, hitting the shoulder and the body for it, I believe. So, okay, it looks like Toby kind of drove in. Yeah, so he kind of lined up, drove deep, and hit the body. And it was kind of like a straight shot. And it looks like he had his offhand here in a position to kind of cover his arm. You can kind of see this offhand position right here. And he's ready for it. And he kind of just goes straight in around to hit this body. I like that he varied his quadrant, where his first shot was out around to the outside to try to just pull his guard out a little bit that way. And then he went straight for this hit. I think that was good. I think he surprised him with his lunge distance too. Nocti, what you need to do in these kinds of situations is you're kind of standing and throwing in place. If he lunges forward at you without a defensive implement, like a second sword or a shield, you really want to step back when someone aggresses to try to give yourself a little bit more time to react and potentially make them miss if they're throwing in a low quadrant. So I think we had a good step back on the second fight, but he didn't, there's an initial step back here, right there, but that was after his guard, right? I think you want to read that step forward and step back. And that was kind of afterwards. And there's another one. But here I think we decided hang and bang. No, he did step. Okay. Let me see here. I might be wrong about that input. Yeah, I think you had the right impulse, was just a little bit late to it. So I think that input for me doesn't really stand. I think the main thing here is not a footwork error. I think there's an experience deficit here where Toby is the fighter who's faster, has better reaction time and stuff like that. And that's fine. That's kind of unavoidable. I think the main thing that Toby took advantage of, if I had to put a pin on it, was that this sword here is super vertical. And the problem with a vertical guard here is it kind of doesn't cover fully shots to this outside here, right? You want a guard that's shaped more like house guard, like a roof, so that you know that your outside lane is covered. Because if you have to move to cover a lane and you don't initially have a lane covered at all, it's really easy to get pulled in this direction, and then the real attack kind of came around this way, right? So the reason that you want a guard that's shaped like house guard, let me see if I can draw it for you. It would be just angled a little bit more like this. Is you know that this shot is covered this way. So if he throws to the outside here, you know that you don't have to move your hand more than maybe an inch or two. You don't have to angle at all. It's fine. And that means that this outside sensitization doesn't really mean anything. And when he throws to the inside here, right, you know that this is open. So when you step back, you just switch into the other guard. But this vertical guard here kind of only barely covers shots to the outside at just a tiny, tiny ratio. And it does not cover this side at all. So you have a 60% guard here, and you have a 12% guard here, right? And what you want is more 100% guard on the outside. You want 100% here, and you want 0% here because you switch to the other guard that is 100% guard on that side, right? So you don't want to economize to try to cover both directions when there are multiple lanes. You just want to cover one lane and force them to go to the other lane so that you know what they're doing. So house guard, so that's just like take your guard from vertical like this to horizontal like that. Not quite horizontal, but like a diagonal. Just turn it horizontally a little bit. And then when you want to guard the shot to the inside, basically the shot that killed him, you switch over like this. House guard. Okay, so I think that that's my input for this fight. Rock, thank you very much for re-uploading it. I think the footwork was correct, but was just a little bit late. But that prediction speed will come with time. So we're going to go to Zeldin and Rock with board. I think this is the first set. I don't know what first set means. You'll have to explain to me what you mean by that wouldn't have helped up with the follow-up to the torso shot from below. You would have to go from here. Let me show you. Let's give YouTube a bit to reset itself, and I'm going to answer Mazog's question. So what you would do, you're right about the shot from below, but when you go from this guard here, when you've got a shot that's coming in at a low quadrant, you flip it vertical and shift it down like that, right? So it's you can have a vertical block when the shots are coming in low, and it'll catch it. And it's easier to shift to this low crossbody block from here as opposed to over here, right? So, like complete house guard, I'll draw it up for you so you know what I'm talking about. And we're gonna do orange sword. So, top quadrant guard. My biceps just look like that, Chief. They're not mugging. Smaller than they used to be after arm surgery. So, I'm talking about a top quadrant guard that's here. And the other guard. And then the low quadrant guard looks more like this. And this, right? So you obviously will have to like connect to where you're dropping your guard down, but like it doesn't make sense to say that this guard here is not going to do this guard here's job. Like that's why there is another guard for that. House guard's four things. We're talking about the roof of house guard being the place where you want to start, and when you see them coming in low, then you switch to this one down here, this guard down here. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, all right. I see that Mazog sees what I'm talking about. Yeah, I was just, I'm more focused on like stopping that first shot, but yeah, you would need to use all four guards. I'm glad you asked the question, Mazog, thank you. So Zelda versus Rock sword board, we'll see if we can come back to it later, but we've got Toby and Rock on Florentine. All right, thanks for coming, Deprive. Also, the Justigeist acronym and Gotta Go acronym, I just realized that those are the same. Wonder if that's intentional. Okay, that's good D. That just looked like an accuracy fault there for the most thing. That happens. I think, personally, so I really don't like stabbing on Florentine as a lead play. I think it's very difficult to deal with stabbing, so that makes it effective. So if you're fighting a Florentine that you know is like not very good or doesn't have good timing, is going to have trouble parrying it, I think that that's an okay time to lead with a stab. I would not lead with a stab on Rock, especially because one thing that Rock does really well is Rock is very good at backing up and counter-striking and making people miss, especially when they do something committal from too far away. I notice when I tend to fight Rock, I need to be a little bit closer than I think I need to be on someone else to be able to hit them. So I think for like when you're not at like at the better side of a skill deficit, I probably wouldn't lead with stabbing. I think exceptions are like if you're super tall or you're willing to take a really low position like Zeldin has. But like in Florentine on Florentine, I think it's against someone good, you will likely get simuled from that and people react to like a back wrap or a shoulder attack. And sometimes you do get unlucky and stab people in the legs or stab people like in the chest or the face. And then you don't have a guard that you can use after that. So like stabbing is committal in the sense that it's like hard to get your sword to return to guard. So that's more like stabbing. And I think I said it in my keep videos with Florentine that stabbing is more of something you would do when you know that you have a bead on their timing and they want to come in and try to fake you out, and you would counterstab them on their step in, so that you beat them on timing with something that is unexpected and really quick. But I think dropping your sword down really low can be a risky play. Okay. So Rock setup here. He's got a right hand pump, a right hand stutter, and a left hand stab here. So he has a context set up for that stab. Thank you, Rock. To make that work, right? What we're trying to avoid specifically is like raw stabs. Like that's the kind of issue. And you notice that, so you guys are hand matching. You guys are hand matching on your weaker side, Toby, your left hand, to Rock's stronger side, his right hand. And the orientation of your shoulders are kind of like this. I know Rock is kind of turned inside right now, right? But he stabs with his left hand. So that has that carry angle that we talked about where it curves in like this that makes it more likely to hit. I believe, Toby, you stab with your right hand, and it's got this carry angle here that makes it more likely to miss. So stabbing with the hand that is not matched to your opponent, I think, is a little bit more effective than the one that is matched to them. Hey, Morpheus, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate it. You did great at Keep. I loved your videos. You had that really cool like cross pump to a drop, reverse wrap. I made that work at fighter practice last week. It was really fun. Thanks for doing that. So just to kind of backtrack, Toby, if you wanted to stab him, I think that it's better to do it with this hand because it's more likely to be perpendicular to his torso based on the fact that you guys are hand matching to the right. Also, like, I think that if knowing you two, I do feel like Rock is a little bit closer to ambidextrous than you are. No one is truly ambidextrous. Anyone says that is a weeaboo and brings shame upon their family. There's no such thing. But Rock has a very highly trained left hand. I feel like you're not quite as confident in your left hand. That's a situation where you're like not required to hand match. So you might think about using a different setup and not fighting hand matched for Florentine if you have a hand that you think is strong and a hand that you think is a little bit weaker. So it's not essential. Yeah, it was a really helpful shot, Morpheus. Thank you. Okay. And this was Toby, I think. I think this is too deep of an outside drive here with your shoulder that's back. So I think that overextended you. So what you want to do is when you're fighting Florentine is whatever hand is forward is the jabbing hand. And then this hand is the hooking hand. But I think in boxing, you wouldn't want to just lead off with a hook, right? Like you would want to get a feel for your opponent's timing their tempo, their preferences by throwing some safe jabs with your extended hand first, and then you would reserve your hook for when you know that you've got some kind of advantage. So I think on that fight, like you threw a stab with the wrong hand on fight 1, and then you kind of threw like a big hook with the wrong hand. Flow is very fucking hard. I think it's in this weird space where it's more like results. And Florentine is like long time, little creep up, big results. All of a sudden, and then it levels off like this for Florentine. And then board, I feel like it's more like a straight trajectory like this, where all of this area here is learning to use your left hand correctly in the different stances. And then, but like nobody's fucking willing to do this part, right? So when you get to right here, suddenly you're just taking categories in Florentine, and then because no one wants to work on it at all. So once you get some basics down, you just get this huge leap of results up here. But then like it gets hard. It gets harder after that to edge out the other people who have spent time on Florentine. Actually, this is that was an awful diagram and was not measured up with the screen. Sorry about that. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. All right, let's keep going. I don't want to redraw that. I'm tired. All right, I think that was the same fight. So I feel like Florentine has a really long ramp up, and then you get really good at it all of a sudden and start winning brackets, and then it kind of levels off. Also, good taking the time to reset your morale there, especially like on what might be the last fight. That's really smart, because the other thing that does is like if Rock got 2 really quick wins, it not only just taking a quick breather, clear your own head and help you work with your own mind, but it also stops their momentum too, because Rock is like, yeah, I'm on a fucking roll. Like I want to keep banging on this shit, and taking a few seconds can help get them to sag just a little bit, which could be the difference between winning and losing. People did that in Smash a lot, and it was really frustrating, where I'm like, hit the fucking start button, kid, I'm gonna dunk you. And then I would feel like gross and stale. They would call it freezing people out. I had like one dude who refused to hit the start button for like 2 minutes, and he got on his fucking phone like the I think you should leave skit about the news pundit who was, anytime he's losing a debate, he just gets on his phone and freezes the other guy out. Is exactly fucking like that. If you haven't watched I Think You Should Leave, it's required reading for understanding my sense of humor. I think we had like a kind of a simultaneous exchange here, and Rock called his shot late. That was a good reset there. All right. That was a great call by Toby there. It looked like he had 95% of the block. It got slotted in his shoulder. That was really good stuff. So the main thing, Toby, is like you got to get your left hand more active here and use it as like just a means of establishing some control. Like all you got to do really is just throw more horizontal chops with that hand and maybe some very shallow flat wraps to the outside so that you can work your way to getting your right hand into play. Like you have to think of your right hand like a vampire, where it's kind of got to be invited in, right? And you want the left hand to knock on the door, and then the right hand to come knock them out. So hopefully that makes some sense. Yeah, no problem. Well, all you would do to kind of work on that is just like when you're fighting an AR, take Florentine and just say, okay, I'm going to kill people with my left hand. I think the classic, like old school way to get good at Florentine is you take a 36-inch sword in your left hand and a 30-inch or 28-inch sword in your right hand and just fight with it, right? Because it makes your right hand kind of useless and except in specific situations, and automatically trains you to use your left hand in most cases. So I think it's a very good way of getting a lot out of Florentine training without putting a ton of thought into it. Anyway, Toby versus Geitz Florentine. Let's hit it up. Okay, this is good patience, Geitz, but I would want to see you throw some chops or something to take a little bit more control, because you've had like 4 or 5 uncontested openers where you haven't really threatened Toby at all. I'm not sure what you're looking for at this point, but that's just too much comfort to extend to your opponent, and you should at least like throw it back at his hands or something. You're doing good lateral movement so that Toby's like not able to quite comfortably set in. But I think that was just too long of giving Toby the lead here. I think a gray ace. Okay, let's watch this again. Yeah, this is definitely like a gun-shy thing. He actually told me at fighter practice yesterday that the input that you gave him, and he beat me up in single sword for quite a few rounds during intervals, so that was good advice. That's true. He's worried about his knee, too. I forget about that. I think that he had said, if I recall, he, oh yeah, that advice worked for him super well, Rock. It was kicking my fucking ass. I was like, what are you doing? You're supposed to wait while I hit you. The knees are fairly optional. I think, yeah, that was, I think Geitz had said single sword. He was nervous about his knee, but then by then he was like, okay, this is going to be operational for me. Let's go back. I want to see. So the main thing I see is you're taking a defensive position a lot of the time, but this is kind of a nothing burger block. Right? Like, this doesn't really cover much. I think it's like, you usually don't want to cover your low quadrants with your swords. You want to protect your low quadrants with distance from your opponent, which you are doing, right? So I feel like you need one of these swords, and most likely this one, to move over here with this sword to give you a little bit of defensive coverage on that side and try to funnel Toby in to try to go around this way, or vice versa, but it looks like you guys are agreeing to hand match on the left side over here, right? So I think where I want these hands, my default position in Florentine for where am I going to put my hands, I feel like you're both kind of too low. I like to imagine a line between the height of our shoulders, and I want to put my fists, generally speaking, on this line. And I want to be so far away from my opponent that these hips right there, that's not an option unless they try to close really hard on me first. So I've got an upper quadrant defense on both sides, and then my lower half is protected by distance, because if they throw a low shot in Florentine, it's extremely committal. You can hit them. Let's go here. You can hit them. If they jump in low, you can drop one hand down, and I can block them out with this hand and chop from the low position, or I can block with this hand and chop across from this position. And this sword over here, right, this still gives me like a guard if I'm chopping horizontally, right? So if they try to throw down, they can't hit it. And then this hand on this block here is still covering that hip as well. So like throwing low in Florentine is really tough. And if they do, you kind of want them to throw low, right? Because it's highly committal. You can punish it very easily without much of like a contest there, right? So like I don't want to cover that. I want you to try to throw there. I want to cover those top quadrants to make sure that I'm not like gonna get sniped from long range. So I think the advice Rock gave me about throwing more simple chops also played in the gun shy nature. I was waiting too long for my big moves. Yeah, it was good advice, man. It was really working well for you the other day. But I would like to see these hands for both fighters like a little bit higher. This is very low. And you can protect yourself from stabs by staying kind of far away too. I think the side to side looks good here too. But you're kind of just moving about this far this way. And then you're kind of reversing and moving this way, and then going back this way, and then going back this way. And that means that the advantage of moving laterally is not there for you anymore, because all Toby has to do, knowing that you're playing defense, is just if you get misaligned where you are, let's say, off the center line over here, but you're not being aggressive, and Toby is staying on this center line, all he has to do instead of reorienting his footwork, is just wait till you get back in the position that he wants you in. So, like, if you're going to take lateral position and he's not going to challenge you on it, I think that it would be better to move the whole way around him and throw shots, safe chops with your hand-matched hand as you go around if he's not going to, like, respect your lateral movement. But I think continually reversing this lateral movement back and forth this way is it's very close to the same thing as not moving. You're still throwing some smoke on the timing of the things that you're going to throw, but you're not really taking advantage of him being off the center line and needing to reorient unless you take like some kind of aggressive action, which ties into the advice that Rock gave you very well. So I think low hands. Maybe Guide's a little bit too much work with your right hand right now. You had like two different chops from two different directions with your right hand, and you kind of just protected yourself with your left on this one. So I think it's like, yeah, I think you got hit there. Maybe we're trying to block. That makes sense. Okay. Okay. I think that was mostly just like the gun shyness there and the lateral movement not being very committal. I think you need to take some offensive action to complement that lateral movement. I think it's better than standing still for sure. Yeah, definitely. I think that lateral movement is like kind of easy advice to give and a bit of a nothing burger, but I think you still need to threaten him with the swords for sure. Oh, hell yeah. Okay. We got a video. Yeah. They're probably like going up and crashing, and it's wild, man. It's wild. I'll try to just be patient and refresh. I'm gonna love a lot of fucking editing to do. Thanks for nothing, YouTube. I'm trying to do my job here, YouTube. Get with it, man. Like, I don't understand how the algorithm wants to destroy our democracy, but it like can't give me videos of funny whacks, which is the thing that it needs to destroy our democracy in the first place. As me distracted while we kind of like softly shoehorn fascism into our country. I'm not distracting anymore, so I'm thinking about current events now. YouTube, come on, buddy. You gotta comfort me. I gotta remain distracted. All right, Rock versus Toby, sword and board, set 2. All right, we're watching set 2. All right, so this was double a limb. So one of the things that we have to watch for here for my input is, since we're watching this out of order, there may be context that was established between the fighters in fight 1. So we need to just take all of my input with a grain of salt, because there's a chance that I might say something like, okay, I think that this will work, but maybe it was tried in round 1 and didn't work. So that information is important. But let's do the best that we can here. I think this was basically the finals for sword and board. And Rock fought his way back up from losers, if I remember. Big woof. That was a fucking really good shot. So there's a couple of things going on here. So this is a dark side fake to money. And that usually means that in a previous fight, Rock or someone else landed a dark side. So we're kind of like sensitized to that context, right? So I don't know if this was like a delay by Rock, or previously they hit a dark side. We don't know. But I think the main issue here is, Toby, this is too long of a drive to get close. And this is something that I do to Rock and get killed for very frequently. Yeah, I bet you did. That makes total sense. This happens to me with Rock very frequently. It's like when I want to approach, I'm taking too long to get in my set position that I want to. And then I end up taking too many steps. Right? So it looked like you kind of walked up. And this step looks funny to me. It looks like you wanted a longer step. And it might have been like a stutter step. But I think it was like too long of a forward drive, where you're not a forward drive, but like a slow forward approach. And then you tried to use kind of the speed from that to lunge in. It looked like this lunge was kind of shallow. So Rock had a long time to kind of react to it. But what you want to do is, if you're trying to close a lot of distance quickly, you don't want to like slowly accelerate here and then start going really fast here. What you want to do is take some kind of positioning, maybe laterally, maybe like backwards, and then from one of these positions, basically what you're trying to do with these positions, any of these three, is you're trying to get Rock to counter position to deal with you, right? So if you move down this way, Rock's going to move this way to engage with you. If you move up this way, Rock might move up. Or if you move back, Rock might move forward to engage with you. And then you would change direction and attack from these directions. So what you're trying to do is not like accelerate so that your approach is faster. You're trying to decelerate your opponent so that you are able to get in on them quicker, right? So you want to take some kind of movement to get your opponent moving in a direction so they can't just like move to deal with you easily. You want to make them have to cancel out some of their momentum as a part of the equation to get them to move into the right position that you want to, right? So you want to think about like combining this positioning with like different movement to get them moving in a direction first, and then you change that direction, right? So it looked kind of like you stuttered a couple of times before you came in here. So it's like, I guess maybe that wasn't too long. I think maybe you saw the dark side fully working against Sick. All right, thank you. It looked like maybe you aborted this attack because you were worried about the dark side. which is super valid, and that's just like good decision making on Rock's part. That's good stuff. But you want to think about like how you get close. Yeah, we're gonna take a break for ads. I tried to start them up for a few seconds. I tried to start them up 3 times, and then it finally faked me out and started ads. So we're gonna take a break. All right, we back. So I didn't realize that moderators had the ability to snooze ads. There's like a little countdown on my screen that says like 3 minutes till ads that I'm trying to use to like wrap it up and find a natural stopping point, but it doesn't really tell me that you have snoozed them. So, and it also doesn't tell me how long again. So just let me hit that button myself, but I appreciate it because you only get like 3 or something like that. So it just does it. It throws off my tempo a little bit, but thanks for trying. I appreciate it. All right, let's get back to work. It's a technical difficulties today. Okay, taking lots of time on high pressure matches, which is always a good idea. So resets your own morale, cools your opponent's momentum. I think we're halfway through this one. Let's just finish this one up. Because I think that this one we won't have too much input, but the first ones will have a little bit more. Plus, I don't know if that's going to load. Okay, let's see here. This was, I think. Let me see these shots again. So we had a money. Okay, so that didn't have much of a fake to it. I think it had a little one, but it was like kind of too small, I think, to really communicate much, and kind of just looked like the startup. I want to see if that's the same thing on the shoulder wrap. I think it's going to be right here. All right, so I think that had a really tiny stutter, but I think that kind of only really succeeded in kind of activating like a counter strike. So it's tough, but I see kind of 2 things here. The first thing that I see is like, Toby, you might want to investigate under pressure if you feel like you are shortening your fakes too much, because I'm not convinced that Rock reacted to your stutter to throw on it. My intuition is that they were just trying to counter strike your shots because they didn't really see or feel threatened enough by those initial feints. So I'm wondering if you are trying to muscle it too hard, because under pressure we all tend to like try to go faster, but if you do that with a feint, the problem is that it becomes so small and so tight that there's nothing for them to react to, so you don't get the reaction that you're expecting. So you might think about like, am I making my fakes too small? Was it a pocket stab? It looked like a shoulder wrap to me. No, that was a... Are we... First one or second one a pocket stab? That looks like a shoulder wrap. I'm talking about Toby's shot. First shot. I'm talking about... Here. No, that was a reverse wrap. Yeah, I'm talking about Toby right now. What was I saying? No, not yet. You won every bracket. So you're not going to get a ton of input from me on this. But I'm happy you're here and participating. So what was I saying? So you might think about, like, Toby, are you making your feints too small? And I think the other piece here is that in all of these fights, it looks like Rock is basically, aside from the dark side, it looks like Rock is jumping you preemptively. Aside from this one. There's a couple of ways of looking at it. The first might be Rock is thinking, all right, I hit them with a big feint, so I know that they're going to try to throw early on me to not get feinted on, so I'm going to try to counter-strike. So you have to be aware of that strategic shift in the pattern, right? Because that's the counterplay to being feinted on, is to just throw really quick. So I think Rock knows that, and they ended up shifting to like a counter-strike strategy after getting that. But if they switch to a counter-strike strategy, well, counter-strike beats faking, right? So you may need to use some like anti-counter-strike patterns to do that instead, like pumping, catching a block, and then throwing after that. That's something that Rock is very good at, is that they don't use one timing principle, they use many, and they rotate between them. And that's when people start becoming really dangerous, because you don't know what they're going to do in the next fight, but you know that they're not going to do in the last fight, right? So you have to take the time to be patient and try to divine, like, okay, what counter-strike strategy, what timing strategy are they going to use? Are they going to fake on me? Are they going to counter on me? And you need to select the appropriate counter strategy for that. And you need to take the time to figure out, like, are they changing counter strategies? So I've watched the SMB final fights back a few times. I was super tense and rigid with my movements the entire time. I was not in a strong headspace and was fighting myself as much as I was fighting Rock. I think that's a fair assessment. And I think that it's very smart conclusion to come to. I wonder if that's related to tightening up your feints too much. But you need to, I think, just take a little bit more time to try to figure out, like, what timing strategy are they using? Are they faking? Are they counter-striking on this round? Because Rock changes it every time, and half the battle is just deciding, like, what counter-striking or what timing strategy are we on in this particular fight. So reverse wrap. All right, what's the last one? I think if you were probably also more relaxed in set one, so I think we'll get better info out of that too. This is a good mix-up. All right, let's go back. This is the first set. Let's just start with the first set. Let's see what we've got here. So we'll have to just mentally delete the second set. All right, this is a little close. Okay. So I think that this is a little bit close to stand on round one. Like, you're fighting a warlord, you're not going to beat them on timing or hand speed or reaction speed. I feel like when you're fighting people at top level, the bell curve of speed and reaction speed, if you have to assume that your opponents in the finals are probably on the top end of that spectrum with you, on the top end of that bell curve. So when you're really close together, what you're trying to say is, I am going to beat you on attributes, right? I'm going to beat you on my speed, my power, my reaction speed, the discipline of my hands. But at the top of the bracket, like that's not an assumption that we can safely make anymore in a seeded tournament, right? We can make that assumption in round 1 and 2, but not as we get further up into that bracket. We have to be more careful. So I feel like a little bit more distance would have been smart here, because one thing that Rock excels at is stepping backwards and countering too. So if you're starting close, it's very likely that as soon as you move, they're going to react with a backward step and counter strike you. So you have to think about, like, I need to get Rock moving so that I can try to use their momentum against them and catch them on a lateral step and press forward on that lateral step, or just something that's going to cut their speed down a little bit so that you can get a little bit closer. I feel like that's something that's really only safe to do from a distance. You could do some, like, I think it's okay to be close, and you could do like some lateral movement there, but you don't want to be close and static. I would probably just not be close though. But if you have to be close, don't be static while you're close. Okay. I think you have a little bit of a tell where when you're ready to, I don't know if you see your sword action here, but when you're ready to come in, it looks like you're shaking your sword back and forth like in a stutter. Like it's kind of a stutter, but it feels like kind of an indiscriminate stutter. So I don't feel like this vertical shaking here. I think that you could say that it looks like kind of like the start of a shoulder wrap, but I think not really. I think if I can, this isn't the best angle to be able to tell, but it looks like you're shaking your fist to throw. But I think a stutter is going to look more something like a pivot with the shoulder. Usually when I stutter, I pivot with the shoulder, or I drop the shoulder to make it look like a low shot. Or if I want money, I move the shoulder like diagonally down like that. But like shaking your hand is by itself is kind of like not quite there in my opinion. So it looked like you were just a little bit too close here. And you got like a leg shoulder combo. I think the appropriate reaction to get it looks like you kind of dropped your shield to cover that leg a little bit after the fact. I feel like the reaction that you want is to, if you get hit in the leg, drive in and try to go for the body or back off and drop. But you just got to be a little bit mindful of that reaction. That may have been unintentional. Why did that land? Okay, I think that this worked for two reasons. I think it was because Rock just hit you in the leg, so it makes you more likely to want to drop your shield down and not get legged again. And I think you're also too close. You did a good job of moving laterally to set up something, but this is kind of too close, and you're trying to beat them on speed again. And the problem with trying to beat someone on reaction speed is you have to also imagine it like you're also creating the weakness of like since you're trying to concentrate and react more quickly, you will also react more quickly to feints, right? So it's a kind of a position where you want to try to make sure that you're like getting them to move somewhere and then closing while they are moving in the incorrect direction, as opposed to like kind of just trying to get close to execute that plan. Good money, good money. I think that was kind of a case where like fight one, Rock got that feint and then the shoulder wrap, right? Fight 2, Rock tried to do a feint as a dark side's kind of a fake, right? And I think Toby switched his timing principle that he wanted to use to be like a counter strike. So he saw that open up. I think that that's kind of a case of a thing that Rock could improve that I think we mentioned for Toby was like you have to think about like good fighters will change what timing principle that they're going to use. They're kind of like your Pokemon that you would pull out and they have like different types. I want to go back and see because I know that there was a stutter before that, right? So let's go see it. I think Rock did like a quick stutter, and I want to see if we like drew the wrong conclusion from it or what. So I think there's like a high stutter right there. How did Toby react? High stutter. Oh, that's good though. That was good. So actually, this is awesome on Toby's part. So Rock pumped with his hand, and Toby took a step back, right, which says, I'm going to play defense. So this isn't something that Rock made a mistake on. This is Toby doing a very intelligent timing principle change. So Toby took a step back to say, I'm going to play defense, which means it's okay to fake on me. And then Rock tried to fake on Toby and got money shotted for it, right? So that was an absolutely correct use of your body's communication to throw smoke on what the actual timing principle that you want to use is. Or the other way of thinking about it is like a step back is like saying I'm going to use defensive timing. So on beat 1 of the exchange, I'm going to try to block and retreat. And I think maybe Toby said to himself, like, I already used that timing principle, right? So now I'm going to use counter-striking, where you just throw on beat 1 as soon as they move. And that ended up working really well. So that was good analysis because Rock even did the correct thing. Rock researched by stuttering to try to figure out what timing principle we're going to use. Toby showed Rock one of them and then gave them a second one when they approached the second time with like the correct thing that they had indicated. So that was a very sharp. I think that was just like a missed block or something. Yeah, that was I think the opposite advice. Yeah. This is a situation where like you want to very carefully pressure and remain upright and get the person who's down a limb to exhaust their option and then hit them very safely for it, right? So that makes total sense. You tried to like end the fight a little bit too early. There's a normal mistake to make. Rock and Geit's sword board. I know how helpful this is going to be for Geit's because they just switch back to strap shield. So we're going to see if we can get like high level analysis, but we're not going to be picky on how Geit's is using their punch. Okay, circling. Dark Souls time. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, I think... Yeah, this is definitely be a real gun shy. You let Rock throw on you 3 times before counterattacking. So you need to throw something back. Especially like if you're at a position where like you know that once Rock gets kind of close to you, it's going to be really hard to get them away from you. You're going to have to stand and bang. A lot of the times, a good counter strategy for that situation is you can cross trap them. So if they kind of get too close, you can throw that high cross and throw it kind of shallow and repeatedly, and then step out around them and kind of turn their aggression into a trap for themselves. Because if you start crossing on them and you keep doing it repeatedly, they have to either egress or outtime you somehow. Is very difficult to do. So that might be like a good defensive option that feels aggressive, but like if they get too close to you, hit that cross and move, like mash the cross button and move out around them to pin their hand down and get a better angle for yourself. Good play, Beat. I think you got the same footwork action that we've got, this kind of idle lateral movement. Better than standing still, but not quite useful because you're going back and forth without taking any kind of aggressive action. So all Rock has to do is wait for you to get yourself back on their center line. So you want to either continuously circle to keep them continuously uncomfortable, or you want to take some kind of aggressive action to make sure that they're trying to at least make some kind of defensive prediction that's going to lock their hands in place. This is better. A little more aggression. No! Okay. 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 I just wanted to play that from Rock's viewpoint. I think that the feedback of being gun shy makes a lot of sense in the context of that particular attack, because one thing that can happen is when someone does something really silly, like wait too long to attack. I call it kind of, the way that I refer to it internally is beating them on complexity, where you do something that like isn't a great strategy, but it just doesn't make any fucking sense, right? Like, I think spin shots are a form of beating someone on complexity, where it's like, it's not that spin shots are great shots. It's that they're so fucking weird that your brain just sits there and beholds them, and you're like, what is this shit? Like, I don't know what to do with this. This is fucking strange. Where, like, if you see someone who's, like, trying to take extra attack frames or extra time to launch an attack, and it's, like, taking too long, I think it's okay to just, like, throw on them safely, to just give them, like, a real quick, like, get serious. You would be surprised how much that saves you if you can recognize, like, someone doing something kind of cumbersome and slow, and you think to yourself, they're trying to beat me on complexity. They're trying to make my brain bug out and do nothing, so I have to do something or anything, like, right now. I think that that's a good way to kind of, like, stop spins. Like, usually if I see the back of someone's head, I'm like, it's go time, motherfucker. You're not going to kill me with a spin. We're at least going to simul. I'm not going to be that fucking guy for you and your friends to laugh at. Like, I'm going to go in and do it. And you get infinite retries for simuling. So that's like, most of the time I talk about like backing up being your default reaction. But I think when someone does something really weird that's slow, I think that it is okay to default to just like attacking and pouring on the violence in hopes that you don't get clipped. But that was a great attack by Rock. I like how Rock immediately used the same setup, but then did something different with it too. Kite's taking a good break to just reset a little bit. Yeah, we can see it again. One more time. Sorry, buddy. That's fair. That's fair. At least it wasn't a spin. I think it's easy for me. I'm talking a little shit, but it's easy for me to imagine that hitting me too. I think you getting hit by it is like totally understandable. I think if I got hit by that, no one would ever let me live that shit down for the rest of my fucking life. It was definitely like a Margit moment where he like raises his cane up. Gonna get ya. Bonk. If Toby spun on me in our match, I did the same thing. I would have left immediately. Oh man, don't put that target on your back, man. Everyone's gonna start doing silly stuff to you to try to grief you. Don't put that target on your back. Oh, what a wrap. Okay, I don't think you did anything wrong here. I think that was the main thing here was like Rock kind of stepped in and you let them stay too close. So just like step in, pause. Yeah, that was like another delayed attack. So I think that makes sense with the feedback that Rock gave you where it's like, hey man, just chop sometimes. I think that makes total sense. I think not only did Rock give you great advice, but they also abused you with that advice first a little bit. So that makes sense. Sometimes delayed attacks are like really good. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, good box. All right, Rocket Dallas. I don't know how useful my feedback will be for these two because these two, I think, are roommates, or at least were roommates for a time, and are knight and squire, and know each other very, very well and deeply. So, like, I might make some suggestions here that, like, wouldn't work in the context of the two of you fighting, right? Because it'll be a situation where I might say like, hey, why don't you try like a lateral movement and then money, and then you might think like, oh well, I've tried that doesn't work, and like that's okay. I just can't predict that interaction, but I think that my commentary is going to be something more like it's going to be more for the audience than it is for you guys. So don't take any things that if I say like they should do this in this situation and you're like that won't work, then it won't work. You would know better than me. You two know each other very well. Ooh. So that was a really smart snipe by Dallas to lead off, where it was like a scoop shot, where I think Rock was like gonna throw a dark side because they were anticipating a high cross, and Dallas is like, I know that the counterplay to that is a scoop, and it seems like they barely sniped that wrist, so that was good. Good drop. I like that Dallas is using like a squat to kind of imply like I'm going to go forward or low to get Rock to back off. That's good. I think in a situation with single sword, I don't know that I really like want them to back off too much, but I could see like the use of it. But it's like it's good body English. I don't want to see how you use it. Okay. I also think it's very smart to not chase for too long as well. You saw there, Dallas hit that squat to kind of fake. I think if they saw that Rock was out of range and they stopped And I think that that's really smart and a good lesson for anybody when you're fighting someone who has like a faster retreat than you have in advance. You have to be very careful to... It's the going too far and overreaching that usually gets you killed in this scenario. And I think Daedalus avoided that very intelligently. Looks like Rock got a snipe in there. No, it's lefty on lefty. Good snipe. Good snipe. Okay. We're settling in. But that wasn't a fight, was it? I didn't see a hit there. That looked like a reset. I think that's... Yeah, it's just a reset. Okay. Yeah, that's how you tap your shield. It's just a long reset. Okay. See this again. Okay, got that butt. So this looks like, I think, it's like Daedalus kind of set up a cross, and Rock just kind of, this is like a good example of like an anti-counter strategy where Rock came in and waited and then threw that hip wrap around. I think that they understood that they had it mostly on shield positioning, which I think is kind of a risky way to do that. I probably would want to optimize by stuttering to get them to throw first and then seeing if I can catch that block afterwards. But pausing is okay too if you win. If you win, it's okay. I think the main thing here is that Daedalus was close too long, and you have to think that like at this range, like this range right here, this is top quadrant range where what we can reach, like if you imagine that we stopped right here, the things that we can reach is something like these areas, and then these areas are not out of reach yet. I understand that they went a little bit closer than this, but this is kind of my viewpoint. We're like, red is a danger zone and we need our gear up high. If we get any closer than this, the blue area is going to be in the danger zone too, and then we have to react really carefully. So we went a little bit closer here. I think that that was an example of like a Daedalus over closing. I think that my instinct here, right, is that Daedalus wanted to be closer so that they could get the angle that they needed by lifting their hand up high to cross, right? So you're kind of getting like, if you imagine this on the frame with the sword pointed forward, when you lift your hand back like this, what this does is it pulls your sword back, but it lets you get this little arch here that lets you kind of go around the shield. I think that I am hesitant to do that for a shot that's like the cross here. I feel like I want to create this angle mostly with small changes in lateral positioning as opposed to like getting closer, right? So I think raising your hand excessively pulls it out of a defensive position where if Rock was so inclined, they could cross in here to deal with this as well. I think that you want to create this angle with small lateral shifts and not by like raising your hand super high up. It's valid and you can do it sometimes, but I think that the result here was that because we wanted to get that proximity to get the angle from raising our hand up super high, that our hips came into play here and we weren't ready for that. And the other difficulty is like if you are that close and you're counter striking, you run the risk of getting a bad trade where you were prepared to lose your arm because you threw like a cross as a counter strike, but like you got hit in the body instead in a location that you weren't expecting. So you want to kind of think about like when you engage with people's top quadrants, you want to usually do that at max range so that you can deny access to your low quadrants by maintaining good distance from each other. And also being a little bit further away makes it just a touch easier to read. The only exception, I think, that if you want to hit the top quadrant and from that close, is like if you're stuck there and feel like you can't retreat, or if you want to wrap the whole way over their shoulder with like a big full wrap. That's the only other time I might suggest getting that close. Is that you would want to do that in a situation where you know that if they get close, they want to also go low, and that's when you would throw like a full wrap in. But Rock doesn't do that. Like I don't think that they're going to try to get short on purpose. It would be if they were going to get short, it would probably be to go for a low quadrant. Okay, that was another delayed attack. We gotta get you off Elden Ring, Rock. The master of the delayed attack. You gotta be like, the next time you throw a delayed attack, you gotta be like, foul tarnished, in search of the Elden Ring. Looters and pillagers. Or whatever Margit says. I guess that's Morgoth that says that technically. So what if you double delay it? I think that if you double delay your attack, Miyazaki will have a fucking stroke and go ascend directly into heaven. Do not double delay it. I want an Elden Ring sequel. Do not do that. And don't even think, what if I triple delay it? No, don't ask that question. P2 Kratos and Hades 2. I have not played Hades 2 yet. No spoilers, please. That's next on my list. So, losing an arm and taking a leg here, good strategy. Circling, good strategy. Mean, but good strategy. Yeah, I look like they kind of just out-positioned you, but let's try to figure out why this happened. There's two elements that I see to this. Element one is in the rotation, where you'll see Rock shift this way, and then shift out around this way. And what happens is, you see Dallas make an adjustment with their knees, and then I think Rock stops and attacks right in the middle of where they would make another adjustment with their knees to line up correctly. So let me see if we can catch that. So we have a knee adjustment, and then Rock gets a little further. Maybe that's not quite what I saw there. I think they did a second knee adjustment that I didn't see. What this looks like to me is like they went just beyond So there's an adjustment. There's another adjustment. And there was one more horizontal step there, so that we're like just outside of the center line by a little bit. So I think that that's element 1. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think the other elements. Oops. We're too far back. And the other element is we've got, so this is not going to hit. And we know that, right? So if you look where that landed, let's see if I can, I forget the button for it. There we go. So that was a looping shot up to here. And it just hit the front of the shield, right? I think Rock knows that this forearm is mostly out of play. But I think that Daedalus could reach it if they overextend. But I think that Rock was probably aware of that. And you can tell that this is kind of a shot that Rock's not really intending to capitalize on, because their body position is like a T here, right? So the only way that they can really go back is like up like this. If you're smart, you can like drop this knee forward and get even lower, but that's like even more committal and would be a very rare thing to do. But so I think that the purpose of this undershot was just to sensitize this area and get Daedalus thinking, I need to block this lower quadrant. Which is like, you have to think about it, like, well, why would Rock want that lower quadrant where they have to get closer? Because what they want is probably more like a top side shot to the forearm, because they could do that from further away. Because if you look at this, the distance here that they actually have to go to hit this body, that's like nearly a foot, right? So that's probably not like a real intent there, but rather just like an impression that Rock wanted to throw out to get Daedalus sensitized to low quadrants so that they could hit high. So I think they come and get like a good whiff there and go over the top too when Daedalus overextends and hits that leg, going for the leg. So I think that's my input for there. There's good stuff there for sure. And that's also one of those situations where, like, again, these two have been fighting each other forever. So like, you can't just fight in an optimal way, because they know what the optimal way of engaging with each other is, right? So if they both fought in like a perfectly optimal way the entire time, like, it's going to end up in a stalemate because they both know what that is. So they do have to express some suboptimal options to just make the fight confusing enough that they're able to get an edge. But I think that those are the items that are in effect at this fight that I would like for the rest of the audience to kind of just consider and appreciate. Let's get Hodge. It's Hodge and Zeldin. Okay. Okay, good. Keeping the range here to not get stabbed. Okay, we'll spend a short amount of time on this one. Thing number one is you have to watch the forward leaning against a person who is already forward leaning. So check this out. Where we have to assume that if we're going to stab here, right, this is going to go up like this, because your arm just kind of has to swing that way to draw it closer to your opponent. So if we lean forward when we extend, we're giving that sword a much more perpendicular target to hit. And the thing about stabs is, like, you want to try to not be perpendicular to the angle of the stab in as much as you possibly can, right? So you just definitely don't want to counter a forward, like a heavy forward lean with this, with one of your own. You want to counter this with range and timing and lateral movement, and just making sure that they don't have the access to it. Also, we are not hand matched right now, which increases the likelihood of getting stabbed. So we want to try to avoid that. I think hand matching would have been a smart idea here, especially because I think Hodge is right-handed. So I think that you would probably want your right hand forward on this specifically, because Zeldin is giving that kind of left hand. It's pushed out a little bit further. And it's kind of a confusing situation, right? Because, like, this technically, Zeldin's right leg is forward. So Hodge is matching his feet here. But you can kind of see that this is the forward sword and is not in a defensive position. So we have to assume that it's probably in an attacking position. So I think that we would want to hand match to this hand in this case. I think Hodge took that one by crossing now and launching some stabs of his own, so that was smart. Okay, big right-handed choppy boy. I wonder if this is going to be an opener for a stab. Okay, Hodge got it. Nice. Good job, buddy. I think the main thing here is, like, Hodge played this very smart, actually. I think they're not like a heavy fighting person, but this is really intelligent. So Hodge used a blade beat to get this sword off track, right? And that's, I might actually steal that because I struggled against this stance of Zeldin, but he just smacked this sword to get it out of the way and then kind of intercepted Zeldin's crosses and just kind of crossed him. And I think when Zeldin's plan to stab him kind of didn't work out, it looked like we had like a bit of freezing here where he kind of pawed with that left hand. And I think Hodge was very smart about this and said, like, well, I know that he wants this stab. I need to get this sword out of the way, so I'm going to smack it and get inside. And then he kind of just popped him real quick. So I think that that's just a good example of, like, it's not the counter strategy that I would think of. But I do think that I want to, like, experiment a little bit with blade beating, that, like, heavy stab position. Because it's, like, it's as forward to me as possible, right? Like, why would I not just smack it out of my goddamn face while I close in and then bonk? So that's smart. I think that's why it's good to, like, review things at any level, because it's just an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about practicing before. Like, you can learn stuff from anybody. Very smart play by Hodge. All right, so we got Geitz versus Dallas. And what was this one? Okay, round one. Interesting. I think that this was like a max range blade beat to entice Geitz to come closer. This is a max range blade beat by Geitz to entice Dallas to come closer. And when they jumped into that range, we got a hit wrap there. So that's the only way I can stop Zeldin from stabbing me is the sword beat. Yeah, okay. I mean, he took me out of fucking single sword in February. So I wish you had told me that in February, Toby. Not only did you beat me up with wall and ball, but you didn't teach me how to kill Zeldin. And when you clearly knew what the answer was, why do you hate me, Toby, specifically? I am very nice to you. I think Geitz blade beat's a high fake to hip wrap, hella good combo. Yeah, it was really good looking. I think it also kind of rolls into what I said about over closing too, because I think that Dallas still wanted high targets, but was too close to get said high targets and got hip wrapped for over closing, essentially. My board took a hip vacation as well. Yeah, you got to give your board PTO or they get sick. Yeah, where's the high fake at? I think it's like a shoulder wrap. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's interesting because it looks like one of the most critical strategies for tall people is finding the beat on which the shorter opponent is closing and faking during that beat, because the shorter person is like trying to watch the sword to catch a guard and then go in and hit them. And so fakes are really powerful in situations like that. Yeah, my plan was to bait a counter, so I threw a blade beat to slow the return down. Smart. That's a great use of a blade beat. So I think that one of the principles that I would recommend for Daedalus in this is like you kind of can't just get close on demand, right? You have to get your opponent to commit to doing something. So a lot of the time that's catching when they're moving laterally and you drive forward because their momentum is not going in a backwards way to do that. So you kind of have to like keep their sword a little bit busier to make sure that you don't get hit on approach. So like one example of doing that is like if you need to close in on somebody and you think they're going to counter strike, stutter, catch the block as you step in, and then throw. But that looked kind of like you lost control of the sword on the blade beat and just kind of went forward. And it looked like you tried to throw money on the way in, which is like, I guess not a bad option. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I'm right about that input. Yeah, that was kind of too big of a drive, I think. When it was like not your turn to move forward, essentially. I think if your opponent does something like blade beat or safe shot you and you're not expecting it, it's not the time to go in, or you run a high chance of like walking right into like their setup, which I think is kind of what happened here. That was a great move by Geitz. That was pretty sick. I was busy looking at my arms and didn't see what happened. Looks like a fucking sausage casing, man. I gotta cut. Let's go back to this. Okay, yeah, that was like I think you had a repeated intent here where it's not quite money, but it's like a low scoop, and it looks like it got stuffed here. So Daedalus, you got to think about like you threw a low quadrant shot on round 1 and it didn't pan out, and you kind of threw a second low quadrant shot on round 2. I think that kind of didn't pan out either. So you got to vary the quadrants a little bit more. That was a good block. That was a good block by Geitz. Okay, I think that was just like, yeah, getting like stuttered with single sword. Basically, like with sword board versus one sword, you kind of just walk in and stutter to get their sword out of position or hope that they throw and then kind of catch it. So I think when Geitz was kind of looming in towards you, you needed to back up and play a little bit more evasive, but it looked like you kind of planted and committed to attacking. And I think even just like moving slowly backwards would have helped you out. You can always like throw, if you're able to just at a minimum maintain max range and chop at their hand, you would be surprised how far that can get you in sword and board if you don't feel, when you're down a limb, if you don't feel like you can kind of like outmaneuver them or move laterally real hard to get around their shield. Even just like backing up a little bit and trying to draw them out, get them to overextend on you, and just throw straight chops down to that arm when it extends forward. So I think that's my input for that. I think that was great play by Geitz there. That was really solid. All right, up here. Good boy. Many people log in just to see the puppy. So it's puppy time right now. My poor lad is having some difficulty with his feetsies, where he had like a bacterial infection in his back feet. So I think he's through the worst of it, but he's still got a problem with the itching. So he's got his shoes on. I'm gonna see if I can just, very carefully pick him up and show you guys the shoes. You see that? He's a good boy. He leaves him alone for the most part, but he's like, every time I bring him out, there's like a special antibacterial, antifungal mousse that I'm like putting on his toes. And when I bring him out, he's like, no, Father, not the shoes again. How could you do it? Poor buddy. Oh, big yawn. Big sleepy boy. Say hello to your fans. Say hello to your fans. It's like, don't shine the light in my eyes, Father. That's a nice boy. All right, buddy. You ready? So, we got Geitz. This is Dallas and Flo. Dallas is a retribution, so let's check this out. Okay, so right off the bat, I like what Dallas is doing with his hands here, right? So I think the graininess of the video is making it a little bit hard to see, but we've got front sword is here, and then back sword is kind of here. So the right hand, the blue sword in this case, is creating some defensive coverage for the inside of his hand match sword. So what that communicates to me is that what we want, like this is a proper man matching situation and a proper guard for this, right? So that means that red sword is able to jab pretty safely at the outside because we have blue sword, the right-handed sword, is able to cover the inside of that sword. So that kind of makes it so that our intent is sort of stacked towards this hand-matched hand over here. So right off the bat, that's really good. But that's not the only thing that's good about this. When we're safe on the outside, Dallas is kind of oscillating inside, into and out of this guard. So you can see he puts it up, puts it down, puts it up, puts it down, puts it back up. And what I like about that is it minimizes the chances of Geitz seeing that guard and understanding like that is the guard that Dallas intends to use. An opponent, the other way that you can use that is an opponent that knows like that's what that guard means. You can show them that guard and then do something else. Is another way of using that communication. But this is basically like strong pre-fight communication for Dallas, so that deserves a shout out. I think Geitz is close to doing that, but the difference is, if we look at Geitz's sword, they're kind of parallel with each other. Let's see if we can stop on a frame. So they're not crossing over each other in the same way that Dallas's sword is, right? Like this offhand, which is Geitz's left hand in this situation. This is not creating defensive coverage for his on sword, his right sword. So that's maybe an item to adjust. Threatening low with the right hand. Threatening with the left hand, that's good. So there is some interplay there. I think that Dallas's right hand is definitely the threatening sword here. And as an optimization, I recommend getting more comfortable with left-handed chops, where your right hand creates some defensive coverage for yourself. Because you were smart. You were smart to create some threat with your left hand here, but you've thrown 3 real shots with your right hand. So the left-handed stutter is like a good bridge to getting more confident with your left hand, but you definitely need to create, the next step is like create real threat with your left hand to get that right hand working for you. So let's see if Dallas uses it. Because the other thing that he could do is create all this threat with his right hand and throw with his left. So maybe that's what he does. No, we're down a sword. I think that may have been like too many attempts at sniping from long range. And then Geitz picked up on the counter timing for it. So you want to watch, like, if you sniped once or twice. Yeah, that was too long of a drive from a stab. You can't do that. Like, you need to set that up. I think, like, so, like, if you think about it, a stab is we talked about how committal it is, but it's also, especially if you're, like, kind of stabbing for the lower body, it's not really that much, like, longer of a strike than, like, a hip wrap or something like that. And I think, like, a hip wrap, if you're just trying to reset, is a little bit faster. And you're more likely to have, like, a guard after that that'll help you. I want to see if there's, like, a setup here. I don't know if you hit this or not. I can't really tell. It looks like no. What's the setup here? No, not much of a setup. So, stab in this situation, though, I would argue the only time it's okay to stab in this situation is to interrupt your fully handed opponent's approach. You would definitely get them if you do that, right? Because, like, Florentine already has enough problems trying to block stabs at all. But you want to, like, not stab them from downtown. You want to stab them when they're coming to you, and then meet them and stab them then as a counter movement, not as, like, a long range option. It's weird because it's weird because stabs is, like, technically, like, one of the longest range options that you can do, but it's like it's just highly committal and doesn't have any defense. So if it misses, you're just, like, in a lot of trouble. Whereas, like, a missed slash is kind of recoverable and you can turn it into a guard afterwards. You can't do that with a stab. So you need to make sure that they're coming at you. Okay, so right hand threat, I think. You can also do the reverse of this guard, just as an aside, where if you have the red sword here, you can also put it back here, like along the inside of the forearm, and it's like, hey, I'm going to lead with my left hand. It's kind of like the other Florentine stance that you would use. So this is like, this stance kind of communicates, I'm going to try to blade beat and control with this hand, but I really want to hit you with my offhand. But if you have this sword back here, if this is here, you more like the communication is like, I'm going to try to pick away and jab at you with the left hand, essentially. So they just kind of communicate different things. They're both acceptable. They both work. You need them both. It's just like, that's the other thing that you would do in this situation. I think for Geitz, I would want to see since he's right-handed, I would want to see the right hand forward and the left hand over top, and the right hand turns into the jab hand from long range, and almost use that left hand like a punch shield to create some defensive leeway for yourself. Because you're the longer of the two fighters, so you have more range. I mean, you're kind of doing like this this goalposty guard from long range, but like, hey man, like, he can't reach your left hand. You're too long for that. Like, he's gonna have to fly in super far forward. So why wouldn't you stack your defensive options towards your on hand, which is also your strong hand here, and just say, like, come through my right hand with like a little bit more of a turn, like a outward turn of the body. So I feel like you're kind of defending a side that, like, you don't have to defend. Like, you can defend that with reach, essentially. I think that was kind of just getting pieced up by good shot selection and rapid fire from Dallas. Why did this work? Okay, I think he caught you in the middle of... I think Dallas caught Geitz in the middle of like some kind of rhythmic footwork. So it seems like he waited until he thought that he would start to take a step back in the other direction and then kind of went into fire. And I think that kind of... Do we have an angle? Like, not much of an angle, but I think this was really just about like tempo. Oh, and great left-handed throw by Dallas. So you can see here. So he's done a lot of work to make this right-handed threat, and he very smartly switches to his left hand as the thing that is going to kill him. So he's like, wide out shot, gets it, and it comes in, and then chops him up with his right. So that was really smart. I think that I would want the left hand, the hand-matched hand, to be the primary threat in round one, since it's like uses this space a bit more optimally and get the right hand out to play. But this is still really great work in understanding that the fights as a sequence kind of evolves as a story, and you can't just like treat each fight as its own separate unit. Like, you correctly identified that your right hand was the primary threat in round one, then you use that to set your hand up, your left hand up for victory in round two. So that's perfect use of that. Okay. On hand again. All right, better approach, right? Like that shot, that reverse wrap, kind of turned. It was like pretty shallow, and it could have became a guard very easily. So I think that that's a very smart approach. The same thing again. I'm going to see if that's going to turn into a fake or something. Good block. Good block. And also to call it out, this was a perfect example, Dallas, of using stutters to draw counter strikes, blocking, and then riposting off of them that we talked about before. So let's just watch it again. It's right here, I think. It's like stutter, block. So I think you were maybe a little bit far to counter strike from there, but you executed the first two parts of that plan correctly, and then rightly decided, like, we're not at the range to throw back, we can't make it. So that was good. You just snuck that one in there. That was great. With the left hand even. That was excellent. Man, this round hurt more than the Dark Souls shot. Pure mental gap. I don't want to get Simoed when I have an advantage. Yeah, it's like... It's tough. Because you're not as safe. You're not as safe in this as you would be in Sword and Shield, right? Like, if you got the arm in Sword and Shield, it is extremely hard to come back from that. Like, Rox was saying that they feel like they have a good comeback percentage in that situation. But I think that my napkin math would be like 2% of people come back from that situation. And Rock probably comes back from that situation like 5 to 7% of the time against like an equally skilled opponent. But it's very hard to come back with that in the sword board. In Florentine, you can still die at any time. You have to be extremely safe. So the thing to do here is when you get your opponent down to one sword in Florentine, that is especially the time to use a stance with like a crossed guard. Let me grab my swords real quick. So it's the time to use like a cross guard. So like, let's say that I have my right hand and I'm matching with their left hand on this side, right? So what I might consider doing, there's two ways to do it. I'll use this sword and say, okay, we're going to play single sword, but this sword is going to stay back and stay at home. And I'm going to pick at them from long range while this sword just creates defensive coverage and makes sure that they can't reach into the body and hit it, right? Because if they reach across to the body, I can block it and then just snap my lead sword over, right? So that's one way. The other way is you can reverse it, and I've got my offhand sword is forward, and I've got this backhand sword, like my knockout sword, is back here and ready to strike. And what you do is you blade beat with your offhand to establish control, and you get the sword out of the way, and then you throw over. So it depends mostly on like which one you like better, how comfortable you are with your offhand, and which sword is the main one. But I feel like if you have that kind of A-frame guard with Florentine when you're back like this, it does make a little bit more sense when there's two swords, because like stuff could come from like either direction, right? But if you fight a single sword person, you've got two swords in your back like this. The problem is like your farther away sword, your offhand sword, is like back here doing nothing. So you're basically like agreeing to fight single sword with them because you're not putting your offhand sword forward in play. So I think that was kind of that's my theory on why this match went south for you. And that's an excellent comeback by Dallas, just using his offhand and it's kind of taking a win in a situation that he probably should have lost in. So that was excellent work by Dallas. I hope that makes some sense. Like the sword interplay with Florentine is super important for like making sure that both swords stay in play, because it's easy to kind of like leave one out of the equation when the other guy's only got one sword. So like you just need synergy between your two pieces of equipment. Okay, glad that helps. I'll show you more about that at fighter practice. It's cool because like you have tons and tons of options too. All right, Rock versus Selden in single. Okay, good offhand parry by Rock. I think this is kind of a situation where Selden is like, okay, you know, that low stance is communicating like, hey, I'm gonna stab, and Rock's like, okay, you can try it. I'm gonna parry that, right? And you can. What's interesting is once Rock caught this offhand block for stabs, Zell didn't try to do it again. So you watch how his stance changes here, right? You've got a low sword. I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you. Doesn't work. Yeah. And Rock just very accurately slotted him in the shoulder. Now watch how vertical Zeldin's sword is after this, right? He's like, that was a bad idea. I'm not going to do that again. And his back is straighter by a little bit. He's like, I'm going to kind of play like a proper slashy game. And you got a hit for it, so it was a good adjustment. But it was just interesting how Rock was like, don't fucking stab me again. And Zeldin was like, okay, I won't. At least that's my internal narrative. That's just a good dodge and counter strike by Rock. Oh, well, he missed it. It was close, but he did the same thing again. I think that was just for the reset. I feel like Rock's feet are a little bit inactive here. I would be a little bit more active with someone who's like as dedicated to counter striking as Zeldin is. That's good stuff. Great step back. That was a good example of when someone moves forward on you, the best reaction is to step back. I think Rock did a good job of kind of like anticipating it, just like kind of pop back. That wasn't this one, it's the next one. I think that one was kind of like a lazy step back, but the only goal there was to get like a simul. It's very stabby and very countery. Very much so. To your credit, like you did a great job adjusting to that, because I did not. Like I lost to Zeldin in single sword in February, which I can't stop complaining about. I hate losing. It's hard for me. It's rough. This is good. There you go. So having a backward step as a reaction to sudden approaches when you don't know what someone's going to do, it's very powerful, and I think Rock demonstrated that extremely well. Zeldin and Hodge. Good parry. I'm surprised that Zeldin didn't want to stab here. I'm very curious why. Oh yeah. Yeah, sometimes you have like I don't want to say like a gimmick, because stabbing is not a gimmick. It is like a powerful thing to do. I think it's more like a clear strategy that your game is centered around. I think that's like a good case in point for like how quickly a top level fighter can recognize that fact, like, oh, this person's strategy is based around this, and then I can draw these conclusions and react to them in this way. So you have to think about like it's okay to base your strategy around like a specific, like one or two specific elements when you're starting out, but as you begin to crest into higher levels of competition, that is not enough anymore. You need like 4 or 5 really good strategies to plan around. Yeah, stabbing is disgusting. In single sword, I think it's like less bad in Florentine, but man, it's tough to deal with in single sword. And Zeldin's very good at stabbing. Yeah, I'm curious that he didn't want to do this here. I think his plan was kind of just to like, I think he felt like Hodge is not very fast yet. Hodge seems like they're early in their fighting career. So it seemed like Zeldin's plan is to just parry with the offhand, if possible, and get their forearm, which is smart, I think, because like when you have a fighter who's sometimes just a tiny bit, swinging a tiny bit slower, sometimes our brains don't recognize that slower swing, and you don't load a correct plan. So I think just waiting carefully and catching it with your offhand and then hitting them is a good way of kind of counteracting that just little anomaly about people who are early in their fighting careers. So I think, okay. Same strategy there. Okay, so my advice for Zeldin here is the slashing game. I think there's a problem with this slashing game, and it may be why Zeldin feels so kind of maybe pressured to stab. As the slashes that Zeldin are using, they don't really have much of like a intent to guard afterwards. His crosses do. But that is a thing that is automatic about high crosses, and that is why people do it so much, is that throwing a high cross is also, it's the only shot that is like, aside from a backhand, it's the only shot that is also simultaneously a block. Like a backhand will come like this, which looks like one of the house guard quadrants, right? And a high cross looks like the other house guard quadrant, right? So that's comfortable, but like some of Zeldin's other lower sweeping shots, they're kind of not returning to guard here in the way that I would want them to. So if you check out these lower, that shot, our hand went very far back, right? Like, I don't know if Zeldin is kind of trying to pull, you see how far back this is? I don't know if this is Zeldin trying to pull his arm like out of the way of a counter, but like you can just put your sword in the way too, and then your arm is like in a position to throw back. So I think like a next stage of progression, like those were kind of the same way too, right? Like we were dropping down kind of into a hip guard, but like kind of halfways, right? Let's see here. And that was a high cross, so that's got a built-in guard, but I think Zeldin might benefit a fair amount from like trying to build guards into their style like after they attack. Like they've got some sharp shots from range and some good accuracy and sniping, but like that's step one. right? You have to have step 2 in mind, which is where you get yourself safe again after you've exposed yourself and thrown. I think my main critique for Hodge, I see them using their brain to come up with good plans, and that's great. I think that like there's some stutters there, some attempts to blade beat, variance in target, right? We're going for legs, sometimes arms, sometimes. I think the main training targets for Hodge are like learning some of the more advanced shots like flat wraps and reverse wraps and backhands and things like that. And I think that they also just generally need like more time in to get their shots like crisper, because they seem to strategize in some intelligent ways, but it seems like their muscle memory is not supporting that just yet. And that is just like a normal stage of fighting that everyone goes through. I think with some more experience, Hodge is going to improve a lot. I'd recommend like pelling and drilling and things, like just throwing as many shots as possible to educate your nervous system on this is how a shot is done, so that you no longer have to think about that. And I am impressed with the extent to which they're strategizing with the tools that they have available to them. That looks quite good. We got Hodge versus Vin. Maybe being very patient here. This is a guard that we talked about at Keep over here, where we've got this left foot is forward, right? And we've got this using as a punch shield. We saw Magnus use that to great effect when they were on their Keep single sword run, so that looked good. Also, shout out to Hodge for reaving and fighting depending on what the bracket needed. Oh yeah, that was really nice of them. I forgot that they did that. So the kind of the power of this guard here with this arm and leg forward is this lets you switch your footing. So you basically parry with this arm and you take this foot and sweep it out around to get into like a more of a fencery stance. So we're going to see if Ven does that. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was good. They didn't step forward, but you can see how the arm is a bait, and they switch their other foot backwards and retreated with that. Very smart use of that. It looks like the accuracy didn't pan out for them, but that was like a great plan. So we're gonna set up again. Let's say playing again. Okay. I think they're calling dab. So this was a situation where they kind of went into fight, but this is too long of a drive. This is like a multi-step rush down. There's like 3 steps. I loved the lateral movement around out this way, so that was smart. I think we needed to accomplish that in more steps. So I think the main thing that it was needed here is like the way that the steps would look is this step goes around once, right? And we switch into the stance, and then we use just like fencer's lunge style footwork instead of like Apolloing rush down footwork where it's like foot over foot. But it still had like built-in lateral movement, so that's pretty good. Yeah, it seems like they just didn't make the block, and they called dab. Okay, so it's what I like about this is it looks like Ven is comfortable in like the standard position with like sword foot forward here, so that's solid. I think I might have used a little bit more of switching between those two footings to see if that is going to help a little bit out, and just to throw a little bit more confusion on that. But that was good. I think that was like another example of kind of a long drive that just didn't have any context. Like the thought process felt like I'm going to run up and smack you, but it's not really. There needs to be like an initial layer of misdirection with some kind of stutter or feint or something. But I do like that there is some level of misdirection with the initial stance with a foot forward with the arm out to block. So I like that that's there. All right, that was a great parry by Hodge. They just kind of caught the stab, parried, and came in. So that looked good. That looked good. All right. Dallas and Toby single sword. We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. So I'm done at 10. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. I have my bi-yearly reporting into my doctor to call me fat. So I have to make sure that I'm up early for that. Okay, starters. I do kind of like Dallas's relaxed posture here. With not showing their stance until their stance is important. I think that's a good layer of misdirection. I do see a little bit of video game character footwork that kind of Geitz was using, where we're kind of moving back and forth in the same space. I feel like we should be driving out to the left, driving out to the right. It's fine to switch directions when one direction isn't panning out for you. Like, that's fine. But just kind of steadily moving back and forth about the same distance is like not what we want. Because what can happen is that if we're kind of switching direction within the same tempo, the opponent can read that and explode onto you when you're switching that direction again. So it leaves you vulnerable while you're switching that range. I think you can make the argument that moving back and forth allows your opponent to, like, it never allows them to settle into your position, but the repeated timing of it tends to be a bit of a weakness. A good stutter. And a stab. Let's see the stab. Any setup? Yeah, I think that this was it looked like an accurate stab, but it was a stab that was like again, stabs are for interrupting your opponent when they're committed to an offensive maneuver. They're not for like a surprise movement, like a lead or something like that, unless you like really fake them out. I think they're a counter move for stopping opponents that are approaching, and not like they're not a 3-point shot in basketball. Oops. Let's see this one again. I think this is like a little bit too grainy. Yeah, this is I think this is both people throwing the body kind of suddenly for the double tap. And I think that that's valid because the whole meta for single sword, it's like you always want to double tap to make sure that you at least get a simul, and you're basically simuling until your opponent misses the simul, which is like not my favorite meta. But double tapping for the arm is more like a thing that you do when it's not a lead. Right, it's a reaction that you would use in a situation where you felt like you were in trouble. So you double tap the arm to reset, but it's not like something that you kind of like lead off with, because you're just gonna get a simul out of it and a reset. I think that you can make the argument that it's gonna sensitize your opponent to outside shots, like in that outside lane towards that offhand. I don't know if it'll be used in that way here. It's possible that maybe they were trying to like go for offside chest. But the kind of the point with this exchange was like, I think there was so little attempt to misdirect the other opponent that I couldn't even tell like who was being aggressive and attacking and who was throwing twice to reset. My instinct is Toby was attacking and Dallas was throwing to reset, which is like, it could be either guy and it's the correct response for one of them. But I think we need like some kind of like other setup there. And it's just like a thing that you kind of you can't throw that raw, right? Like you gotta, that's the backup to keep yourself in the game if you feel like you got out of position. That's not like a lead that we take points with. Okay, good high fake. Good misdirection variety from Dallas here. Kind of missed that. I think he missed that heavy drive for the leg, and that's all right. Dallas are kind of coming up on 1 foot. See if I can catch it. You have to be careful of this position because when you have this like T-pose here, it's more like a slanted T. But when you have this T-pose, you can't move another time. It's like, it's okay to reach some of the time, but you need to be careful because like if you're locked into this position, it's really easy to get stuffed out. I think you recovered because Toby like egressed, which is good, but you just need to be, you want to try to keep both feet on the ground as much as you can and move kind of like, your goal should be to like float low over the ground to try to get like as much interaction with the earth as you can so that you're able to stop, change directions, build speed, etc. I don't know what the call is here. The audio is not going to be cooperative with us. I'm going to ignore that one. Let's see this again. Okay, yeah, that was like, that was a raw stab with a good backup plan to double tap for the offhand, which I think is like a good thing to do if you notice that your stab misses. But I think we've talked about raw stabs and we want to be careful about them. You want to use it as a counter move. And I think Toby kind of just like defended himself there. I think that was a reset. That's good money. Let me see what that hit. Okay, so at this point, okay, I think we're a little bit overcommitted to cross counters here. I think basically what happens is Toby throws money, and the upward sweep is a feint, is not like a feint to get you out of position. It's kind of a feint to get you to throw. What I would have liked to see, I look at he hand blocked this. Yeah, he kind of tabled his hand over and got a hand block with that. That's one way you do it. What I like to do is pump, catch the block, and then money and throw it over, right? Because then it's like if you miss the hand block, your wrap shot, your money is like still in time. But if you get like if you miss the hand block and you just like kind of fake up and throw on someone who's going to counter strike you, a lot of the time you can get killed preemptively because there is like the sweep up and the wrap down. which could be a second move. But that was still pretty good. I think that was just like Toby got a beat on the timing. Yeah, man, the handbrake. Yeah. I got to get a link to the handbrake in addition to my diagrams on YouTube. But yes, that is the handbrake. Just raw stabs again. You don't want to. The things you don't want to do is like Florentine. You don't want to throw deep outside raw. Single sword. You don't want to stab raw. You have to set it up. Because the risk reward just kind of isn't there. So we've got, I think this is a cross trap into a low shot and a hand block. And it looked like I wonder if that's a reset. I'm not going to agonize too hard over the call. I just wanted to see the tactic here. I think, Toby, you need to be a little careful of when you get like a shot here. It looks like the attempt to get like a second tap in here is very shallow, and there's like a balance to strike here where you're trying to not lift off so far that you lose speed, lose riposte speed, or that you lose control of the other guy's sword. But you have to lift off far enough that the shot is discriminate enough that the other fighter can tell that there was a second and it wasn't a rub, and that the Reeve can see it too. So I might be careful with repeated tap shots are tough because you feel like they would kind of get through because they're getting super fast, but sometimes the motion can feel a little bit indiscriminate. So I think I'm a big fan of making sure that the shots have like enough elbow volume on them that they are clear. I think that one is kind of like I know Dalis is an honorable person who's going to take whatever hits them, and I trust them with that implicitly. But it's just a thing to kind of watch. Like if you feel like you need to swing, but you can't leave the sword too far to trap them, you probably want to try to go for another angle or egress and reset. Let's see this again. Yeah, I think that was just like a raw low shot when people are trying to close. You kind of have to be a little bit more. I would have spent a little bit more time on the outside here and try to just get some high quadrant interactions before throwing low, because I think that wasn't very surprising. And the other issue is Dalis is very Counter-Strike oriented, so a lot of the times while you are driving through from range, to hit that low quadrant. If you don't have something happening to keep their hand busy or their timing locked down, where they're like stepping in an incorrect direction or have to like turn to face you with like from to respond to your lateral movement, that you'll get hit on the way in to throw that low quadrant shot. So I think it's like some of the time, I think for Toby, I think that both fighters in this one, I'm seeing that we're kind of trying to jump to our knockout shots too early without creating much misdirection or confusion for the other guy. I feel like a lot of these fights for this set, where we were fighting on attributes, right? We were trying to use our hand speed or our fast reflexes to beat the other guy, but we're not like engaging with their timing in a strategic way and trying to pick the next Pokemon, right? Like this was like two Charizards, level 70, going at each other, and the result was the result and was like seemed fairly RNG dependent. Like you gotta pick Squirtle even if he's a lower level when you've got someone who has like a specific strategy that they're gonna use. I think it's always better to pick the counter strategy than muscle through their best strategy. I think that was like, to be honest with you, was my biggest flaw as a fighter during my comeuppance, was especially as someone who was like interested in weightlifting and physical training and willing to put in like the time and research and into like not just like the physical training regimen, but also like the nutrition and stuff like that, where I like wanted to beat people on attributes with my strength and my speed and the discipline of my hands. And it was hard and it tore up my body, right? Like I have like surgeries and shit now. I think if there was anything I could kind of change about that career, it would be like definitely like you want to raise your attributes to the extent that you can, but picking the correct counter strategy. And like when you notice that someone is very committed to one strategy, to just change to the strategy that beats that one instead of like trying to muscle it through. So that's one of the advice that's like would sound hypocritical from me, I think, because like that's my favorite thing to do. And to be honest, like it feels really fucking good to out muscle stuff. You're like, yeah, I feel like a man, yeah. But it's just when you if you don't totally eclipse them in that category, then the outcome kind of becomes RNG. So I feel like that was just a consideration for you guys moving forward, is to try to think about like, am I trying to beat this dude on attributes or am I trying to employ counter strategies? Because you could see that Rock, who won the tournament, was not only using the correct counter strategy, but was varying their counter strategy to make sure that it was like always fresh, right? So, and there is some level of like attribute building that's necessary to be a top fighter, but I would argue that Dallas and Toby are like relatively done building their attributes. I'm sure that there's like 5 and like maybe 10, between 10 and 5% improvements that they could find down the lane of like speed and stuff like that. But I think the rest is going to be like recognizing strategies and selecting the appropriate counter strategy, and then on top of that, like communicating a strategy that you do not intend to use in hopes that they select a counter strategy that is incorrect. Essentially, I think it's the next stage for you guys. All right, I'm tired and I'm hoarse, and I have to get up in the morning to have my doctor tell me that I'm a fat piece of shit. So I hope you guys had a great stream. Thanks for stopping by. I know you that this was like my local tournament practice, and this is my local tournament and my practice partners and stuff like that. And you guys see me all the time, but I really appreciate you guys coming in to spend time with me and engage with me and listen to my viewpoint on that stuff. So that's always really gratifying.